Hello friends, a very warm welcome to UnSarkari. I am Vikas Bhardwaj. Continuing our journey and our mission of making complex topics simple and exam relevant and oriented, let's speak about how we see Indian versus the US Constitution in terms of judiciary and important concepts. When we see judiciary, then in case of United States, the US Supreme Court is the final authority and judges are appointed for life. Very important to see. They are appointed for life. Whereas in Indian Supreme Court, judges are appointed till the age of 65 through collegium system that we have discussed separately in our other series. For example, the United States Supreme Court struck down segregation in Brown versus Board of Education, whereas in case of India, if we take one example, then the Supreme Court upheld right to privacy in Puttu Swami case. Other examples also you can take up in case of US, for example, the present tariff. The tariff is a very important and a crucial issue to understand how a US judiciary works. But when we speak about rule of law, very crucial, very important, the conceptual basis we have to understand is in case of United States, it is strongly rooted in the rule of law. That means government is bound by the law and the laws must conform to the constitution. Rule of law. But in case of India, rule of law is very important, very crucial, mandatory, but it has got emphasis upon social justice along with parliamentary supremacy. When we bring the word parliamentary supremacy, that means as one of the organs, parliamentary is also having lot of powers and lot of vision what must be there in the people's hands, and then judiciary will decide whether it is actually following the footsteps of the constitution or not. That is why judicial review, very important concept. Judicial review in case of US is absolute. Courts can strike down laws, as I just gave you example of the US tariffs also, which are inconsistent with the constitution. One example is of Marbury versus Madison, that is of 1803. Very important, a prominent case. In case of India, a judicial review exists, but parliament can amend the constitution except the basic structure. Very important to understand. So the US Supreme Court struck down the segregation, as I just told you, the segregation case, and in case of India, Supreme Court went on to uphold basic structure doctrine through Keshwanand Bharti case in 1973. That means we have come up to understand two very important points: procedure established by law and the due process of law. In case of India, procedure established by law is very crucial because according to Article 21, no person shall be deprived of his or her life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. Meaning thereby, as long as Parliament passes a law, it can be restricting liberty, even if it is unfair. It will be there unless until it is violating fundamental rights. For example, preventive detention laws like NSA, National Security Act, it is upheld if the procedure is followed. Similarly is the case with you know, the power and also processes adopted by even Enforcement Directorate or even CBI. The due process of law is very important to understand because in case of US when you see it, it is the 5th and the 14th amendment which is protecting life, liberty, property through due process. That means fair, just and reasonable law. Meaning thereby court will not just examine the procedure but also fairness and substance of law. Very important. Fairness and substance of law. That is what we have also adopted from the US. So the US courts struck down unfair laws like racial segregation, and whereas Indian courts initially upheld preventive detention like MISA until they found that it is expanding its interpretation too much and beyond the reasonability, I should say. That is why there is a difference between the approach. So there is a evolution or you can say a tectonic shift in case of India towards due process. Indian Supreme Court gradually interpreted Article 21 to include substantive due process. For example, Menka Gandhi versus Union of India 1978 case, not only procedure must be fair, just and reasonable, it must also reflect not just procedure, but as I just said, substance also. So India's Article 21 is now closer to the US due process. When we speak about other aspects of rule of law, equality before law in case of India is very important. Article 14 guarantees equality before law and equal protection of laws, whereas in case of US, 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection. It is a landmark case in civil rights. For example, Indian Supreme Court struck down arbitrary reservations, which we keep on seeing for Patels, for Jats, for Marathas, and so forth. US Supreme Court struck down racial segregation. In case of India, Parliament is supreme in many ways, but it is limited by the basic structure doctrine. In case of United States, Congress is limited by Constitution, cannot amend core rights without states' approval. Very, very important. Very important to understand. That is why the key takeaway is that India initially followed procedure established by law. Now it is evolving to a due process through judicial activism, through citizens' participation, and through the maturing of our democracy. US always emphasized due process, ensuring fairness and substantive justice. So both systems reflect different historical context because in case of India, it has seen a long fight, long journey, fighting through colonialism, and India is balancing state authority and social justice. US is prioritizing individual liberty and constitutional supremacy. With this, we end our topic and we will try to take up such complex topics more and more. Wishing you all success in your examination with UnSarkari.